Hello, thank you for being with us. We are here with Dyslexia Scotland to talk about having dyslexia and also the main challenges that families who have a dyslexic member have faced, the challenges, the ups and the downs, and of course the positive sides to having dyslexia as well. We are joined, I'm happy to say, by Cathy Magee, who is the Chief Executive of Dyslexia Scotland, and also some parents. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell you more about themselves, but they are Alison, Yule, Julie McNeill, and also her husband Iain as well. So I will hand over to you two. Iain, would you maybe like to start and tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Iain Mackinnon. I'm an author and I did very, very badly at school. I didn't get spotted as being dyslexic until I went to university, aged 33. But that kind of explained everything, which has been quite handy because obviously dyslexia has a genetic component, and we spotted that our wee boy was dyslexic fairly early on. So unlike myself, who had a hell of a time at school, he's had a lot of support going through primary and now secondary school. So that's basically who I am.
And Alison, what about you?
So I'm married to Iain. Our wee boy is dyslexic, and as say, we spotted it and had sort of signs that and indications that there might be challenges ahead when he was fairly young. I'm working as a counsellor, as a CBT therapist, and so my knowledge of dyslexia has come with Iain's journey of learning about what the challenges are, and actually the positives. He's been really keen to accentuate the positives of it. So
great. Well, we look forward to hearing more about that later, how understanding what Iain has been through has helped in your parenting. Julie, do you want to say hello and tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Julie McNeill. Similar to what Alison was saying, I'm the only non-dyslexic person in my household. So I have a dyslexic husband and two dyslexic children. And the same as Alison, really, I've been on such a journey in terms of learning about dyslexia and learning all the different ways in which it can impact your life positively and negatively. I'm also an author, a new author, Iain, of a book called Mission Dyslexia, which looks at really bringing out those kind of strengths and positives around dyslexia for children. And when I'm not writing, I work in a high school with children with additional support needs. So lots of kind of different perspectives around the subject.
Indeed, at work and at home. And just to let you know a bit about me, I'm Laura Maciver and I work at BBC Scotland as a journalist. I have a brother who's dyslexic, and that kind of helped me to understand quite early on that my eldest child, who's now 17, Max, that he also has dyslexia, but he wasn't diagnosed until primary 5 at school. And then his younger sister, I've got 3 children, Gabriella, who's 14, and then my youngest, Claudia, who's 10, and she was just diagnosed a year ago with dyslexia as well. So that's my experience of it, but certainly having it in the family helped me, I think, to spot it very early. Cathy, would you like to just say hello as well?
Yes, just say hi. I'm here today as Chief Executive of Dyslexia Scotland, and hopefully if there's anything that we want to say about what we do and the support that we give, I'm happy to help with that. But I'm looking forward to this discussion with parents and dyslexic adults here as well. Really interesting angle, I think, we'll hear today.
Great. Well, listen, let's come to you parents and just find out how the experience has been. Julie, to you first. How has the last year been then for you and for your child at home, trying to deal with blended learning and such a long gap away from school as well, and that one-to-one contact? Yeah,
I mean, it's such an interesting one, isn't it? Because for all the things that have been really challenging about being at home, and it has been really challenging trying to work at home and trying to find new ways of learning and trying to support learning and parent and do all the other things under one roof has been really challenging. But I would say that we have really benefited from pressing pause for a while as well. We've benefited from spending a little bit more time understanding how our children learn. My daughter, who's 7, we are just starting the process of her being assessed for dyslexia just now. And I think that has come to the fore at 7 because we were able to spend a little bit more time really understanding where the challenges were with her learning and the things that she was really struggling with, which she was kind of masking really in the 10 minutes of homework that you get in the evening. My son, his dyslexia seems to manifest itself in terms of the way that he processes and understands information. So for him, actually being able to learn at points in the day that suited him worked really well for him. And actually the technology worked really well for him. He enjoyed being able to learn online. So it's a mixed bag really. I kind of feel that for every bit that was really difficult, and I was really trying to help them understand how to do long division and really failing at that, there was also the really brilliant moments where you got to see those light bulb moments in your children that you don't get to see every day when they're at school, where they really got something, or you found a way of getting your message across, or you found a way of helping them understand. So I would say, you know, it's been a balance, but on balance, I would say that for us as a family, I think, you know, there have been real positives in the last year as well.
Good, that's really nice to hear. What about you, Alison? How's the experience been for you and the family?
Well, I think pretty early on we decided that we would have a fairly sort of relaxed approach to learning online and allow him to sort of work at his own pace. And I think that's been, like Julie says, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. We've had our successes and we've had our not so successful moments, but allowing him to have the opportunity to learn at his own pace, manage his own learning, which is something he's going to have to do for the rest of his life. It's been a really great opportunity for him to do that when, with a fairly low stakes stage of his education. He's in 3rd year now, so no exams, but also a level of learning that requires, you know, quite a lot of self-motivation. So, I mean, I consider us phenomenally lucky. But yeah, having everything online and having everything written, and his school provided materials that you could listen to as well as read. And so I think the technology really played in his favour. Although I don't know if I would say he enjoyed learning online, but certainly it gave him more sort of opportunity to do it at his own pace, which was great.
And did he get anything, Alison, that was specifically for him to meet his needs, or was he just doing the same online learning as everybody else?
He was just doing the same as everybody else, and that sort of really highlighted it, that the things that would have been adaptations for him in class were standard when working remotely. And that was really brilliant, actually, and it's trying to find a way to make sure that sort of continues now that he's back in face-to-face learning.
Yeah. And Iain, for you, did you find that your own experience at school helped to inform the way that you help your child?
I'm going to say no, unfortunately. I wasn't diagnosed as being dyslexic at school, so I was just lazy and stupid and slow. And I was quite happy to coast back and do nothing. So that's the last thing I wanted for my wee boy. I wanted him to excel, because I know that dyslexia is not, you know, a disability, it's more of a different ability. So the things that he does better than other people can manage in his sort of peer set. So I, having gone through a degree in psychology, decided, you know what, I'm going to help him and show him some of the skills that he's going to need in later life and sort of grab hold of the learning for him. And I quickly discovered that Mark Twain was very right when he said that when I was 14, my father knew nothing. By the time I was 21, I was surprised by how much he'd learned in 7 years. It was very much like Father Ted, where they're trying to write the song for the Eurovision Song Contest, and they're just shouting at each other, play the feckin' note! You know, because we are so alike, we clash so violently with each other. There's nothing that I can tell him that he does not already know as a 14-year-old boy, so a 15-year-old boy now. So my attempt to actually help him with his education utterly backfired. And it was probably the biggest cause of friction in our household during the major lockdowns of COVID. And eventually I had to just sit back and go, okay, right, you do this at your own pace, you do this at your own speed. And there was initially, you know, a little bit of difficulty with the online learning, although the online learning is in a format that far better suits us dyslexics. You can watch a video, you can use a text-to-speech to listen to the words rather than having to read through it. But even with all that extra accessibility, there was a lot of difficulty in how to actually use the technology to submit what you were doing. And so there was a few times where he was not completing homework he was supposed to do, and it was purely because he hadn't read through the system correctly to be able to submit stuff correctly. But equally, there was occasions where he had completely blanked stuff because he'd fallen out of favour with that particular subject and didn't want to do it, and could quite happily fall back and say, oh, I didn't realise that this had gone ahead wrong, to avoid actually doing work in areas he didn't like. So, you know, just like any sort of teenager, it's good to give them that structure. It's good to give them their own responsibility, but you also have to keep an eye on them as well.
Yeah. And Alison, how did you fit into all this? Did you find that difficult perhaps for the family dynamic that you had two people at loggerheads?
There was a little refereeing, I think, and you know, my skill set's maybe more scientific than, and so we should have been able to divide the subjects quite well between us, and I've been working in the office more than most people, so I would come home and then there would be maths. So it was quite challenging at times, you know, and none of us enjoyed midnight maths, but it was a good learning experience for all of us, I think, and I think he learned that his parents are fallible, and we struggle as well, and I think that's a good thing to know sometimes.
Yeah, Julie, you mentioned the positives that you took from lockdown, and you touched upon taking them on now. What kind of things do you think might change for the way that your children learn, or what would you like to see change?
Yeah, I mean, my children are younger than Iain and Alison's, but I think I completely agree in terms of, so my son's turning 11 at the weekend, and the bit about taking personal responsibilities, I mean, I do baby him, I think because he had a difficult time with his dyslexia when in his early school years, and I think I'm very protective over, you know, making sure that teachers understand what they need to do and making sure that everything's kind of in place. And I think I've realised over lockdown, over this year, and maybe it would have come anyway at that age, but that he is able to take a wee bit of personal responsibility now. He's able to understand the things that he can do. And that has been quite empowering for him. And he's done the same things, Iain, as you were describing, you know, he's fly as well, you know, and he does make mistakes, but I have to let him make those mistakes. And I think that's been a good lesson for me, you know, that he's learned a lot by the things that he's found tricky and been able to work through himself without support as well. So that's been really good. I think really being a little bit more flexible as well. So this year we've all had to be flexible, and yeah, we have done midnight maths and we have done maths first thing in the morning, and we've done reading over breakfast, you know, things like that, because that's the only, I'm the same, Alison, I was going out to work as well. So actually you need to be able to do a little bit and then go and then come back. And when your working days ended, you're still sitting down with children and doing their classwork. So I think being able to be a bit more flexible in a family is not the worst thing in the world. And for the children to understand that actually they need to be flexible around your schedule, and it's not all about the things that they've got to do in their day as well. So I think they're the lessons that I'd like to take forward, really, you know, helping the children to take a little bit more responsibility on themselves and understand that they can achieve things without us. And also us all realising that there's 4 people in our family, and that maybe we could work together collectively more around each other and support each other a wee bit more.
And Julie, how did your two manage the transition back to school? Because my 10-year-old didn't enjoy being at home. She missed her teachers and she missed her friends. And I have to admit, I struggled with teaching her because I'm not a teacher, and I realised that I'm maybe not very good at explaining things, or methods have changed since I was at school. And so she was desperate to go back to school, but actually was really anxious when she did end up going back to school. Did you find any difficulty with the transition, because yours are primary age as well?
Yeah, definitely. interesting, my 7-year-old, who it was absolutely fine in lockdown, you know, she's a dreamer and she just kind of gets on with her day and she's just a lovely wee thing, but she just got up and went. Like, I thought she would be quite anxious about the change, but she, at her age, I suppose it's just, you know, she just got up and people were wishing her luck on the way in. She thought it was all a bit strange, and she just went. So the things that she was worried about was more, so she has a class bubble and her little best friend is not in the class bubble, is in another class, and that's the only thing she was concerned about. She wasn't really concerned, and she struggles more academically than my son, so, but she wasn't worried about any of that. She just wanted to see her friends, and she wanted to be back into the routine and, you know, back into playtime and having a lunchbox, and that was all the stuff that was important to her. So she wasn't up nor down, she wasn't bothered. My son really struggles. Now, he struggles with transitions and change anyway, and I think that is to do with the way that he processes information. It's to do with the particular type of dyslexia that he has. So he always struggles when things change, you know, the transitions between primary schools, or if he gets a new teacher for a day and things like that. He finds that really, really challenging. So he was really anxious about going back. He had sleepless nights, you know, he was up and couldn't go to sleep. He was, you know, anxious, he was upset. He was trying to think through every scenario because he wasn't sure what would be the same and what would be different and all these kind of things. So, and I think that was, the school were brilliant, but I think they put a lot of the work into the kind of lower primaries. They sent them little videos of the class and, you know, this is where your desk will be, and it'll all be the same, because they wanted to reassure the littler ones, you know. And, you know, actually, in retrospect, he could have done with that. You know, he could have done with having that reassurance about the things that would be the same about going back to school and what the processes would be. So he's coped with it okay. I mean, he's not been as back as along because he's older. He's in primary 6. So they just had a couple of weeks before the break and then he's back again. But I think he would have quite happily just stayed at home, done his learning online, met his friends for a game of football, and then gone on the PlayStation and played FIFA. That would have been his ideal way of learning at school. But I actually think it is wonderful that he's back, and the social aspects of, you know, and working collaboratively and all the things that you get at school that you don't get at home. I think I can see both of them just look better. You know, they look healthier, they look happier for being back at school, I think. So, yeah.
And having the routine of that. Well, I have to say, my daughter, I ended up writing a note to her teacher explaining that she was feeling very anxious and, you know, quite stressed about being back at school. And they've been wonderful. Her teacher and the head of learning support have both been great, you know, just giving her some individual time and attention and phoning me and chatting to me about it. And it just reminded me of the importance of advocacy and how we have to be their voice and how important that is, and actually how willing, you know, teachers are to actually help. Have you found that, Iain? Has it usually been a positive experience for your son, you know, when he's needed extra help?
All the time, constantly. When he was in primary school, there was one particular teacher who was there constantly, Miss Elder. She did her utmost to help him out. She regularly came to the Dyslexia Scotland education conferences, so I'd bump into her when I was volunteering there. But, you know, she's one of those people who'd go the extra mile to help any child. And it was very different from my own experience, you know, kind of being berated for not, you know, paying attention or being smart enough. When he went to high school, he was really confident within himself. I mean, I'm an advocate for dyslexia. It is a difference in the way that your brain's wired, and the part of your brain that ordinary people will be using for processing, for spelling and handwriting, that sort of stuff. There's 2 kind of nodules that do that, but as dyslexics, only one of our nodules is doing that part, so our processing speed is kind of halved, which is why we don't do quite as well in some of these sort of short-term memory tasks or spelling or handwriting. But that doesn't mean to say that we have a deficit. The other part of our brain is not sitting doing nothing, it's actually doing 3D planning. So I was at pains to explain this to my wee boy when he was younger, that, you know, this is very much a different ability, that he's going to be better at things like creative thinking, about three-dimensional manipulation, about planning, these sort of things. And he's grown up with a household with somebody who has been quite successful with his dyslexia. And so when he got to high school, he kind of brushes his dyslexia to one side. He knew he had it. The teachers were all aware. They have a plan that shows what individual children need, and it's very clearly marked on that. But he's never relied upon, you know, other teachers to help with his dyslexia. He acknowledges the fact that, yes, his handwriting, his spelling, you know, might not be as good as his peers, but he's also comfortable with the fact that there's a lot of things that he can do far better than the other members in his class. And the reality is that regardless of your brain chemistry or your brain makeup, we're all like that. We all have things that we're better at and we're not quite so good at. And I think he was really comfortable with this. So, you know, we've not really had much of a difficulty with his dyslexia at school. Obviously, there's been things put in place to help compensate for it. And as we're saying, obviously, you know, the learning that's been online has really suited his learning style. And the biggest worry we have is that there'll be a bit of a step back. Now he's in the classroom, he won't get access to the material quite as quickly. He won't be able to do online videos and online tests quite as easily as he has been during lockdown. So I think that's well, I'll bring my wife in at this point. I think that's probably our biggest concern about him going back to school.
Yeah, and Alison, thinking about being back at school and also the next step as well for your son, do you see it as a barrier for him going ahead, or is, as Iain said, this just something that he is very comfortable with, that he's grown up accepting and excelling anyway?
I think yes. I mean, we've always sort of tried to help him see it as just a different way of brain function, your brain functioning, and different way of being. And yeah, there are some challenges. I think, yeah, looking to the future. I mean, I naturally am, you know, I want him to do well, and I'm quite anxious about making sure that he does. But I also need to understand that I'm not him, and you know, what's doing well for him is maybe is different for me. And I mean, all the subjects that he's choosing are very different from the ones that I would have chosen. I don't think he's quite understood the number of essays he's going to have to write over the next few years. But yeah, I think there are lots of, you know, there's a plan in place. We recently went over his Passport to Success, and that was a good opportunity to really take him through it and say, well, are these things still relevant? And be involved myself, because the school normally just handles that, you know, with him, and just say, you know, now's the point where you need to advocate for yourself if these things are not being, you know, provided for you, if you need these things. And I think he is pretty confident, and he is. I think he's ready to do that. So I'm feeling quite hopeful.
Good. And Cathy, this is a good time to bring you in, I think, as we talk about the idea of transitioning, you know, from school to the next step. My son is just about to do that. He's just finishing up his 6th year, and I just had to get in touch with the school over a prelim he had that they forgot to give him extra time. So I had to go and sort that out. But as a young adult with dyslexia starts to move into a job or a college or university, what kind of support is there? You know, who is advocating for them at that point? Or is that something that, you know, we as parents should be trying to tool them up with?
I think it depends, obviously, what their next, you know, what their plans are. But I think there is, in terms of college and university, the important thing, if that's the plan, the important thing is to make sure that the college knows as soon as possible, and that the parent or the young person gets in touch with the disability advisors, so that they can actually put the support in place as early as possible. Because if that doesn't happen, sometimes young people may be into their 2nd, 3rd term before they get the support, and obviously with the transition to a completely new way of learning, that can be quite daunting if that support has been taken away. So I think some young people, if they have had the support of parents at home, whatever their next stage is, any change, I think Iain mentioned, and Julie as well, any change can be quite daunting. So I think it is about, you know, helping the young person to be prepared for what that change will be. The independent learning is so important, and I think where young people have understood what works for them earlier, then it's transition is going to be less daunting. If someone is going to the workplace, again, that's a new environment, and I think every workplace or every setting is going to be, you know, there's going to be slightly different adjustments that a young person will need. So I suppose in terms of the advocates, it's about understanding what environment that the young person is going into. In terms of things like career support, Dyslexia Scotland has a number of resources that are designed to help career educators and career service advisors, career advisors, to support young people with dyslexia. So again, it's worth, you know, tapping into all of those resources. And I think asking the young person, you know, what it is they need in this next stage. Dyslexia Unwrapped, our website for children and young people, has got a section, there's different age sections within it, and the section for 18 plus has got lots of advice about the young people about, you know, what to do, even things like learning to drive. All of these transitional issues, you know, there'll be different kinds of support available, and it's just really important that the young person and those advocating for them are aware of the different support at the different stages in their life. Because as Alison said, the dyslexia won't go away, but it's a different way of learning. And the earlier someone, the more someone knows about what their own strengths are and where they need help, then the more likely they are to be able to ask for that help. And the earlier that happens in the workplace, in college, or in an apprenticeship, all of these things are about, you know, enabling the young person to be able to ask for that help at the right time.
And Julie, have you found confidence to be an issue for your children? I've found that that's been so important with both of mine, just constantly having, you know, to reassure them that this is just a difference, it's a learning difference, not a difficulty, and just to, you know, to really keep that confidence up. That for me has been the biggest challenge, actually, aside from all the kind of practical and academic stuff. Have you found that already with your two?
I would 100% agree with you. I think that when I said at the beginning that I'd been on a journey in terms of my understanding about dyslexia, I would say that is the biggest thing that I hadn't considered at school. When there was children in my class that were dyslexic at school, I thought, oh well, you know, that one, you know, she struggles a wee bit with her reading, or she needs a wee bit extra time, whatever it was. But never once did I think, is this something that's affecting their confidence or their self-esteem or how they view themselves? And I think for my husband, who's dyslexic, he really, really struggled with that. I mean, he was labelled as a problem child in school. And although he has been, you know, successful in his life and he's a confident man and all the rest of it, there is still that bit of him that he carries with him in his rucksack, that actually that little bit of doubt, because that was how he spent the first few years, certainly his school experience, was being called stupid and being put on the dunces table and been told he couldn't amount to anything. And I think although we have got better in schools, that we hear less and less stories of those types of things happening, I still think that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of celebrating difference and celebrating that actually we don't all learn in the same way and we don't all have the same skills. And I think there's work that we can definitely be doing around the curriculum and around the way that we teach in schools and around teacher training and around the whole support around what we're doing with children, because my youngest, it really struggles with her confidence. It's because she can't read, and she's been asked to read out loud, and you know, that's how you do it in school. You sit and you do paired reading or you do group reading, and her difficulty is around reading, and she just has a real anxiety if you bring a book out. You know, she's just like, oh, you know, we have, you know, we've got to the point where if it's a book with lots of pictures now, we've discovered graphic novels and different ways, and, you know, but it's been bit by bit by bit. But I would rather she didn't have to go through that experience, and there's no reason why she's had to go through that experience where she has an anxiety about something that she's finding difficult.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I would say self-esteem, confidence, they're the biggest things. And as a parent, they're the biggest. I mean, I don't really mind if he necessarily gets his higher maths, or if he get, you know, I mean, that'd be great if he gets fantastic qualifications. I'm really, that'd be wonderful. But if he leaves school feeling that he knows his strengths, that they both know their strengths, and that they're confident, they feel positive about life, and they, you know, they know what they can do, and they're happy in themselves, and that as a parent is all that I wish for, really. So it's definitely those elements that are the focus for me in terms of.
Absolutely. No, I'm the same. We got our son the night before his Hires results. We gave him a card saying, we're so proud of you.
Mm-hmm.
And we just said, we don't care we don't care what grades are in there. We're proud of you for trying your hardest and for always being lovely, and you know, for having lovely reports about your behaviour, because that's actually to us more important than.
And I think that there are amazing dyslexic strengths that you see every day. You know, it's just, it is, as I would say, agree with Iain, you know, it is a gift. It's wonderful as a non-dyslexic person, watching the way their amazing creative brains work. I'm actually really jealous. You know, I'm surrounded by 3 really fabulous people, and I hope that they feel that. I hope that they feel that in their lives, and they're able to use those brilliant strengths and creativity in their lives.
Yeah, Alison, what do you think about the idea of having role models, you know, people like Iain who have excelled doing something creative, or a Kenny Logan, you know, a talented rugby player who got to adulthood, he couldn't read and he'd slipped through the net. It's amazing. So how important do you think it is that kids know that actually just you will find something that you're great at, and that you can succeed, you know, in whichever way you want to?
I think that's a really good lesson that kids is much more available to children these days. The success is a much broader thing than I think it was when I was at school. Success was academic, and that was it. But there are so many other areas that are just as important. And creativity, I mean, where would we have been during lockdown without all of the creative arts? You know, we would have gone a little bit more stir crazy than we did. So yeah, having people to look up to, and having awareness of the options that are available to you, I think is really, really useful for children and adults, in fact, you know, to realize that you're not sort of, there's not one path. There's not one path through life, and there's not one path to success and happiness. And
Iain, how would you recommend or advise helping friends, family, and other people understand more about dyslexia? 1 in 10 people have dyslexia. So what would you say to somebody maybe who is just learning this about their own child?
It can be a bit of a shock. People think that, you know, their child is disabled, that they can't do the things in life that they'd want their child to do. And that's not the reality. It is more difficult for dyslexic children in the education system we have. It's more difficult for dyslexic adults in the work systems that we have. I know a lot of dyslexics like myself who worked in jobs that you didn't have to spell and write, you know, working as chefs, working, cleaning, that sort of thing. And the thing is, dyslexia is a barrier. We've had a lot of really nice positive talk here today. We have an Equalities Act that's in place to help people who need, you know, alterations made so that they can compete on an equal level. However, that is a very toothless piece of legislation. I have been with employers who refuse to change things like typeset to make it easier to read. I've been a part of a master's degree where my tutor gave me a photocopy of the work because I was dyslexic and thought that would help. Now, that being said, I think that's actually a benefit. When you look at the population of people who are dyslexic, we generally are more intelligent than the average person. And I don't have any research to back this up, but my personal belief is that dyslexia is the grit that creates the peril. People have talked about their children masking their dyslexia. We have to try and fit in with people who can do these things, spelling and writing. Dyslexics will sit and memorize passages so they don't embarrass themselves at school. They work their memory, they increase their ability. Intelligence is something is elastic. And I feel that the disadvantages that we are placed against in the sort of industrialized education system is actually something that pushes us. If you look at entrepreneurs, a vast percentage of them are dyslexic because they have had to learn to think out the box. They have had to learn to do things differently to be able to cope and survive. And you know what? Being dyslexic at school and at work, it is difficult. It puts barriers in the way. But I think that that is actually a bonus overall. The struggles that we go through make us a much more rounded and much more empathetic and much more intelligent than we would have been if we hadn't had those struggles.
Cathy, how much has our understanding changed of dyslexia? Do you feel optimistic about the future and the way that it's now viewed?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think if you compare our approach to dyslexia now compared to, say, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there is definitely a changing attitude. I think it is much more common for it to be seen as a learning difference, but also for the difficulties to be recognised as part of the Equality Act. So I think people are more aware that everyone is different and everyone has different strengths. And there are lots of employers that are beginning to really kind of recognise that neurodiversity is part of the workplace, about playing to people's strengths, no matter who you are. So I think there's definite improvements. I think there's a long way to go. And I think there's still an enormous amount of, sort of ignorance about what dyslexia means. It's so often is still associated with reading, writing and spelling. It's associated with school. And I think, sort of the awareness that it affects one in terms of population, as you said, Laura, that it's genetic, that it's lifelong, and that it has nothing to do with intelligence. I think all of that is something that, there's more and more people speaking about their own dyslexia. Ambassadors, our young ambassadors have done a fantastic job at sort of really sharing experience with younger people at other events that we held. So I think it's certainly changing, but charities like Dyslexia Scotland are here for a reason, and the reason is that people still do need support, and it can be a barrier. So I think it's about getting that balance between making people aware that there is support out there, building up the confidence at all levels, making sure that people are identified as early as possible so that they themselves can understand their own dyslexia and what they need to support them. But also, events like this, just raising awareness and talking for people who are at the beginning of the journey. It is a journey. It's a journey through life, and I think there will be ups and downs along that way. But there is so much support out there, and I think that's the important thing, is to, for parents who are starting out on this journey, speak to other parents. Look at what's available. Look at our website. There's a huge amount available.
Great. I'll get the parents to quickly give advice. Well, Iain, I've kind of asked you already, but Julie, what would your advice be to a parent who was just starting on this journey?
Just what Cathy was saying there, I think it can be quite a lonely process. You can feel that you're the only one who's dealing with these challenges and that nobody understands your child or what you're going through. So I definitely think finding your tribe and finding other parents of dyslexic children or other dyslexic adults and sharing experiences has been the thing that has really, really helped me. And in terms of in class and in school, I mean, my son is really, really proud of his dyslexia. I mean, he loves the fact that he is dyslexic. He loves the fact that he and his dad have that in common, and he's really, really proud. So there was a young child in his class that was being assessed for dyslexia, and he was like hoping, he was like really, he wanted to be dyslexic.
Join the club.
Yeah, which I think is a wonderful way to view it, because it's certainly for my husband that would not have been the case. Do you know what I mean? He wouldn't have felt like that, and other children in his class definitely wouldn't have felt like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's that voice, isn't it? The voice that we give our children, and the way that you talk about these things within the home, but also the way that we talk about them in society and with each other and through media. And I think that positive voice is so important. That's celebrating difference and talking about the ways that we can all have our strengths and we can all work together, and that's the way forward, really.
Yeah. Alison, what about you? Apart from brushing up on the refereeing skills, what would your advice be?
I think it's the big learning for me had been that learning that it's not just as Cathy said, spelling and school and reading, learning that it affects sort of a variety of different ways of being and parts of and ways of thinking, and so being able to understand that was really helpful, because it allows you to understand better the things that might feel a bit frustrating, and there's things like short-term memory and processing. If I ask him to do
instructions,
and I think that was one of our first clues that our son might be dyslexic, was language development fairly early on, because it was following and retaining multiple instructions. So I should know that if I ask him to go upstairs and do 2 things, he'll only remember to do one of them. And that's a learning process still for me. I should know that, but it doesn't always stick. But being educated as to the things that it can affect can really help with frustration, because if you're less frustrated as a parent, then you're more able to understand and accentuate the positives, and support your child because everyone gets frustrated with themselves. So being able to understand why things are happening the way they are, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree. Being told to give one clear instruction at a time by the learning support teacher at our school changed my life. All of a sudden, everything was being done. But yeah, too many instructions are definitely not good. Well, listen, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to all of you. Thank you so much. And hopefully anybody watching will be more aware now of the help that is available out there, and get more support and advice if they need it.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.